Hello and welcome to Finding Your Niche, a series designed to share the stories of founders and marketers and how they found their niches in life and business. Today's episode is a fun recording from a live event a few weeks ago hosted by the Wisconsin Podcast Association. I sat down with Ross Overline, the co-founder and CEO of Scholars of Finance, to discuss the founding of Scholars of Finance and all the great work that the rest of the SOF team is doing across the country. I hope you enjoy.
It's a day today, Megan. It is currently what time is it now? Almost 6 o'clock here at our studios in Milwaukee. We're having a great time today listening to all the podcasts. They're all so great, so inspiring. I think it's been just a day full of diversity as well.
It really has.
A lot of diverse shows from video games to music, to movies, to any form of entertainment.
Sustainability, so many different ones.
So many. So
we've got more to come.
Yeah, another one. So if you haven't found your niche of podcast yet, possibly this podcast here called Finding Your Niche, ironically, you might find it here, okay?
Maybe.
So again, if you want to donate, we got to get that number up to 5,000. That's our goal for Live For, helping feeding families around Wisconsin. Go to wisconsinpodcast.com. We need your help right now. But in the meantime, Megan, what do we have again?
We've got Finding Your Niche.
Yes, Finding Your Niche right here on the Wisconsin Podcast-a-thon. We'll have it to them. Let's go.
Right on. Thanks, Hayes and Jason, for introducing us. I want to start off with a brief commercial for the podcast-a-thon. So this weekend's podcast-a-thon is presented by the Wisconsin Podcast Association. Proceeds from this weekend's event go toward Live For's mission to provide food for struggling families throughout Wisconsin. To make a donation, visit live4.org. That's live-for.org or wisconsinpodcast.com. Today, I am stoked to have on Ross Overline, the CEO of Scholars of Finance. I have worked for Scholars of Finance for about the last 9 months, if my memory is correct, Ross. It's been an absolute honor being your direct report. You are an incredible leader, and I have really developed my passion for marketing and finding my personal niche over the last 9 months, and you've motivated me to do that. So I appreciate you coming on the show, and I would like to open up the floor to you to introduce yourself.
Well, thanks, Jake, first and foremost, for having me. The pleasure is all mine. Being your coach and a mentor is one of the greatest pleasures and honors that I have in life. And seeing how much you've grown over the course of the last 9 months has brought me so much joy. So thanks for having me on. And I want to throw all of those comments right back to you because you are excellent. You're exceptional in so many ways. To give a little bit of background and introduce myself, I'll try to keep this brief. As you mentioned, my name is Ross Overline. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Scholars of Finance, also the chairman of the board. Jake, would it be helpful if I just do 2 minutes of background, 3 minutes story?
Ross,
what's most helpful?
We've got about 25 minutes here, so I want to get through your career, and then we'll dig into Scholars of Finance quite a bit. So 2 minutes would be great. Yeah.
Great. I'm originally from Minnesota, not too far away from where the podcast-a-thon is occurring. I spent 7 years, most of adolescence, in the Northeast, in New York City, started undergrad at Fordham University as a presidential leadership scholar there, but moved back to the Midwest for family reasons and ended up getting my degree at the University of Minnesota. I started a marketing and strategy company in college, grew that to about a dozen of us, but eventually scaled that back to focus on academics. And through a mentor, landed an internship at Piper Sandler, which used to be called Piper Jaffray, an investment bank out of Minneapolis, and equity research. And it was then that Scholars of Finance, the company I lead today, all began. Another mentor of mine around that time and made some introductions in Silicon Valley. And I was given an offer coming out of school to become a product marketing manager at Twitter. I left 3 weeks later. I was in Silicon Valley, beginning my career here. I spent the last 5 years in the Bay Area at several companies, most recently at SoFi on the leadership team, standing up their consumer banking division, their checking and savings products. I'm the CEO of Scholars of Finance today. My life is all about trying to improve the lives of others and try to create a prosperous, inclusive, sustainable, joyful world at scale. And any and all, I'm a firm believer that any and all success I have, or that my team and I have driven, is all thanks to others and a massive team effort. I guess in my free time, I'm a triathlete. I have a lot of energy that I need to burn off, so I do that: biking, running, and swimming. And I read a lot. I'm a nerd at heart.
You sure do. And Ross, I think of all the people that I know, I mean, thinking about you get as much done in a week as probably 3 or 4 normal people can do. And so that's been something for me to look up to for the last 9 months in my internship at Scholars of Finance, and we've known each other for longer than that. So throughout your career, you've spent a lot of time in marketing and go-to-market strategy. So what initially drove you into that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So what initially drove me towards marketing, go-to-market strategy was this deep penetrating question that I had faced most of my life, which was, how do you improve the world at scale? There are so many problems facing humanity today. You look at poverty, hunger, over the last week, racial injustice, right? Socioeconomic inequality has been especially salient in our shared consciousness. And a lot of the things that I was doing, it felt like band-aids on problems, or I wasn't even putting a scratch or a dent in these problems. When you look at statistics of poverty, the problem is to the tune of hundreds of millions of people. Hunger, hundreds of millions of people. People that don't have water, and people in developed countries who are anxious, depressed. Those numbers are on the rise. And so through college, I was really asking myself, what can one do to try to solve these problems at a system level? And one of the initial answers that I arrived at was marketing, right? It was this notion that when you find a solution to a problem, once that solution has been derived, then there is this function in business that grows and scales that solution, right? That takes that solution from 1 person to 10 to 1,000 to 1,000,000 to 1,000,000,000. And that's ultimately the marketing function of the company that creates demand and generates growth and captures that demand. So that's what initially drew me to it. That was the beginning. It was a bit of a philosophical arrival, I'd say.
Well, right on. Yeah. So like 5 to 7 years ago, Scholars of Finance was in its early days, and you were starting to develop this mission-based organization. So what were you thinking about at the time you were starting Scholars of Finance? And were you thinking this is going to become a huge organization that's at schools all across the country, or were you just trying to get to meet people in the Minneapolis area?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. Back when Scholars of Finance started, I was thinking a lot of things. I was thinking of how to I was in college, I was still a senior in undergrad, and I was thinking of how to maintain a GPA and continue to successfully service my clients that I'd had through my small business that still was running to some degree. How to lead the clubs I was a part of, how to be successful in my internship, or how to make the managing director I worked for happy and make my mentor not regret hiring me. And I had a girlfriend, had friends, right? There was a lot of things going on at the time, like any, I think, college student has, just juggling a lot of priorities and kind of trying to figure life out all at the same time. But what really kind of, to the point of your question, the spirit of your question, which is, what was I thinking that led to Scholars of Finance starting? A handful of things. At the time, I was still being pressed by this question: how do you create a world that's inclusive, prosperous, sustainable, compassionate, collaborative, right? A world where everybody can have a great experience a joyful, compassionate existence, and not have to suffer, whether of their own doing or the doing of others. And when I was at Piper, I got hired into Piper Jaffray with no finance background. I have a journalism degree. My 4-year degree is in journalism. And so it would turn out that the skill set of learning how to find problems that need a solution, or that people need to learn about, find sources of information about those problems, whether primary or secondary, get in touch with people, solicit the right information, ask excellent questions, build relationships predicated on trust to get information, develop an understanding of a problem or any idea or challenge, and then being able to package all of that newfound knowledge in a way that you can communicate to any audience successfully, that actually drives action or drives outcomes. As it would turn out, that works really well for equity research, right? So when I went into equity research, I really started digging in and started studying the financial sector itself. My job in that finance role I was in what's called the technical analysis team. And one of our products was a technical analysis product where we had 4,400 publicly traded companies,
Mm-hmm.
and those were broken out into over 300 micro groups,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then Piper, the managing director I worked for, his name was Craig Johnson, wonderful man.
Yeah, I've met Craig.
We would,
He's a really great guy.
Yeah, Craig's great. Taught me a lot on that internship. We would then publish our market opinion and outlook on these micro groups. And so my job, Craig Johnson used to call it planning boards. This was his construction analogy, because I came from a construction family. It's like, when you're new to the job, you do the simplest thing. And my thing was to read 4,000 10Ks and make sure that all the companies were still in the right group and that they were categorized properly. And so I didn't know what a 10K was when I got this assignment. So my first job was to learn basic financial terminology, and then analyze 4,400 10Ks. I ended up working with a lot of people at like our FactSet partnership, our FactSet partners, people internally getting a lot of advice, automated a lot of the process, and I got through all 4,400. I actually doubled the speed of that project annually, and I saved the company a lot of money, making that a much more efficient process. But what I got to then do is drink a lot of Red Bull and 2 minutes at a time, understand what a company does 4,000 times. And Ray Dalio, I guess would call it studying the economic machine. Right. And so I had this, I got this really broad study of the private sector, of all major industries. And part of that, hundreds of companies within that, are the financials themselves. And so as I developed this understanding of the financial system, of debt, of leverage, of equity, of distribution, of insurance, of all the different cogs and machinery that make up our financial system nationally and globally, it dawned on me that this was it. Like in my life's journey of like the root cause analysis of what can I commit my life to that could change the whole world, it was finance.
Was there an exact moment, Ross, when it hit you just like that, when you knew this is exactly what needed to be done to change the world?
There was an exact moment where the power and gravity of like the power that finance has hit me. And then there was a moment that hit me where a different moment that hit me where I realized if you can change the hearts and minds of leaders in finance, you can change the whole system itself. I would say it was a gradual process, a very intense intellectual journey of discovery process that was, yes, punctuated by a few of these moments, these insights, these moments of insight. And yeah, at that point, as I kind of had this thought, the CEO of Piper Jaffray, Andrew Duff, came and spoke to our internship class, and he gave this lecture on serving clients first, on upholding the firm's values, acting with integrity, being collaborative, being honest, being transparent. And that's when that second epiphany struck me, was, wow, if all of my classmates could hear this, if all my friends going into investment banking could hear this, over time, we will be the CEOs of these firms, and we could create culture change all the way up, and when we're at the top too. And at the end of his talk, he said, hey, if you ever want to chat, shoot me an email. And I was the one kid of 60 interns that emails the CEO of Piper and got a 15-minute meeting. And so right after that, I met my co-founder, Ryan Quinlivan, who's co-founded Scholars of Finance with me at a finance event. And he comes up to me and he says, hey, man, like we were at two different universities. He was at the University of St. Thomas. I was at the University of Minnesota. And he said, hey, what if we brought our investment clubs together for a happy hour, just like to network and broaden our networks outside of our own schools? And I respond to him, he'll tell you the story. I say, what if we did something to transform the financial system and elevate the Midwest and the global financial markets? He's like, I'm not sure what that means, but yeah, man, sure. Let's talk about it. Let's talk.
What were you thinking through when you came to Ryan with this crazy idea to completely transform the entire system of finance? With this one event that was just designed to bring these two investment clubs from two different universities that happen to be in the Twin Cities together. Did you already see the full vision of Scholars of Finance or where it was going to go, or were you just a really, really confident college kid that was on a mission to change the world?
I will say I was maybe a bold college kid. I don't know if I was confident necessarily, but I was definitely bold, took some big swings and wanted to change the world and was trying to learn and be opportunistic as I went. I was sort of operating under this notion of, understand one's strengths and weaknesses, understand oneself, understand the world, and then with that understanding, try to capitalize on the opportunities that present themselves to you to achieve the goals you have that are aligned to your strengths, right? So there's a bit of opportunism in it. And so when Ryan said, hey, let's do an event, and I said, let's change finance. In my meeting with Andrew, with Mr. Duff, I had said, hey, I would love to meet again. I have this idea that I want to share with you. We got a second meeting for an hour for coffee off campus. And on our second meeting, I pitched him on this idea, like, hey, will you come and speak to my classmates and tell them how you can be a good person and be in it for the right reasons and be very successful? And he loved it. And he said he'd be happy to speak. And so suddenly now Ryan and I have the CEO of one of the top investment banks in the world as a speaker for this event that we suddenly are now planning. We built a small team around it, started meeting with Mr. Duff once a month. Today, he's one of our advisors, one of our donors. He's a very dear mentor and friend of mine, big supporter of our work. And 6 months later, we had the first symposium. We called it Scholars of Finance. The name came up with us meeting in a bar once a week, Wednesday nights generally for an hour. Different weekday nights for an hour, just grabbing some wings and building the plan for this event. We had 130 students and 35 executives for keynotes, and then dinner to talk about principled leadership and finance. And it all just kept growing from there.
And so at that point, you had done what you originally set out to do. I mean, in that first speaking event that you had with Andrew Duff, I mean, you were thinking, hey, what if I could bring this to all of my classmates and share the same message about stewardship and about leadership and finance with all of them? And flash forward 6 months and you had the first symposium and you had done just that. So you'd completed what you originally set out to do. And then what? Where were you going next?
Yeah. Well, at this point, I was in Silicon Valley. I was working at Twitter. I was working 70 hours a week, getting global go-to-market strategy and rollout for core product. And this was a nights and weekends passion project. I flew back to Minnesota for the event. And at the event, at Twitter, I was trying to transform the world by ensuring we democratize speech globally and access to information. But at the event, we had a number of people say, hey, this is amazing. Are you going to do it again next year? I would love to come. And we thought, yeah, we should do it again. Let's do a second annual. And so we did a second annual event. And then we did it again a year later. And it almost doubled in size. We had almost 200 students. We had around 60 executives there. And Richard Davis, who was the CEO of US Bank at the time, was one of our keynotes. And at the end of the night, he came and grabbed Ryan and I by the lapels of our suits and pulled us in real close. Says, gentlemen, what you've done tonight's incredible. Finance needs this. You have to do this for more students at more universities and more cities, and I and US Bank will help make sure it happens. Great work. I'm paraphrasing, but that is almost verbatim what he said. And what do you say to the CEO of the fifth largest commercial bank in the US? He said, thank you, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. And at the end of the event, more people wanted to get involved, and we talked to Andrew, we talked to several other supporters that had been engaged by that point, and decided we'd launch a nonprofit and actually make this something that we do grow and we try to bring to more people. We created the first chapter in Minnesota, a student-led chapter. Ryan and I and a few others were on the board, the founding national board of directors of this nonprofit. And yeah, we raised money. We tested go-to-market in Chicago, launched our first new chapter. And over the course of a couple of years, we raised some significant capital. We did a CEO search. I stepped in as full-time CEO. And through this large, organic, kind of growing team effort, this movement, this organization that Scholars of Finance is evolving into, we're now at 11 universities with 5 programs, including the symposium, regular speaking events through our speaker series. We have a mentorship network, a leadership development program, very kind of intensive 6-week curriculum for self-discovery, which you've done, Jake.
I've done all 4 of them, Ross. I've enjoyed every single one of them, and I've gotten a lot out of just about every one of them. The most I've gotten out of it is relationships from the mentorship program and the symposium and the speaker series, and then on the personal side, I mean, going through the LDP is an incredible experience. You get to know the people in that cohort so well. And then from a personal side, I mean, I got to know myself so well, and I was grateful to do it again a second time with you this year. So I would, for anybody that's interested in finance, that's in a college right now, I would highly recommend trying to launch a chapter of Scholars of Finance at your university.
Well, I appreciate the endorsement. I'm really grateful to hear, as always, that it's had a positive impact on you. And we've had that now. We've reached almost 1,000 students, over 800 students to date. We raised a little over $500,000. There's 2 of us full time, 2 part time on the team. We just brought on 19 interns that we onboarded last week.
Big week last
and
week.
We have, speaking of launching chapters, we have inbound requests just through word of mouth from a dozen plus universities that we're trying to catch up with right now. So it's growing quickly, and we're really grateful for that. Just for the massive team effort it's been, and all the people that have been part of the journey that have made it possible. It's been a delight. It's really exciting stuff.
It's really incredible. So flashing back about almost a year now, Ross. Wow, you're coming up on your 1-year anniversary as a full-time CEO. I mean, that's a big jump for you. I mean, I know you had to cut your salary in half in order to make this happen. And in the early days of Scholars of Finance, I mean, I can't imagine you were thinking, I'm going to make a career out of this. Like, I'm going to be able to work for this organization full time. You had to work for Twitter and SoFi and 5 Stars, and you were working full time while also running this national nonprofit organization. And last summer, you stepped in full time as CEO. What were you thinking through? Like, how does that decision come to be? That's a huge life jump. And how did you get there?
Yeah, you almost frame it like my parents did. You're like, what were you thinking? What are you thinking right now? I appreciate you asking. Cutting one's compensation in half isn't a small trade-off to make, definitely. As Scholars of Finance kept growing, and I've been at several companies post-collegiately and kept studying, learning, reading books, trying to understand the systems that govern the human experience, that govern society and culture. I have dozens of books I could recommend to help in that pursuit of that particular knowledge, like how the world works and how it's come to work the way it does. I kept getting more and more affirmed that of all the things that I had done and was doing, of all the irons I had in the fire, I was also on several nonprofit boards, chapters. I was involved in a lot of organizations outside of my job in SOF too. It became really clear to me that Scholars of Finance was the highest likelihood of the highest impact that I could, of all the things that I had in my life. Like, if Scholars of Finance worked, if this growing vision, this vision of a world where all finance leaders were stewarding the world's capital for the purpose of serving the greater good, if we could bring that to fruition, right, through this growing membership organization run by students, for students, as they graduate as an alumni, they remain a Scholar of Finance throughout their career, becomes this growing movement of finance professionals who want finance to be a force for good, of inclusion, of change, as it has been and can improve upon being. You could literally, over 40 years, 50 years, you could influence how trillions of dollars are spent, are invested, are allocated. The time horizon of solving some of the major systemic problems that face humanity could be compressed from centuries to decades, right? Like, you imagine something like hunger. Imagine you just had banks invest trillions of dollars of assets, hundreds of billions of dollars of assets into development, right, where this is a problem. It's just, with capital, capital drives human incentive and energy, right? So to me, that vision became more clear over time of the potential impact we could have, number one. And number two, there was growing traction and affirmation that we were really onto something. Right after Richard Davis grabbed us and gave us the call to action to scale this, the founding board, we did a lot of research, and we couldn't find any organizations that were doing exactly what we do. And now we've been doing this for a couple of years, and for me, almost a year full time, as you mentioned. have had thousands of conversations about this and still have yet to find someone doing exactly what we're doing.
Yeah.
So there's this clear gap. There's a clear need here that we are filling uniquely. And so when I saw that, this sense of urgency and need really struck me. So possibility, of need, and of urgency. Those three things, I think, struck me all at once. And it was on a board meeting when the board said, "Hey, Ross, we'd love for you to consider the role." My co-founder, Ryan, said that. And then Carla, one of our board members at Citigroup, literally almost jumped out of her skin on the call. She was like, "Yes, you would be perfect for this. You're so passionate about the work." We had a good conversation. I talked to my advisors, to my mentors, everyone but two people in life. Two people in my life, everyone unanimously said, "Ross, you were born for this. You have to do it." And I knew that in my heart. I knew it was true, and I was already committed. But fortunately, I had two people that were dissenting, and I talked to them and really worked through the decision with them. And they helped me approach this in an even more prudent way, right, for myself and for the organization. So in the end, it was a deep, clear conviction that the world needs this. And that I have an opportunity to help bring it here with the help of so many others, right? So, yeah, and I'm also not married yet, and I'm young enough where I can take a risk like this, I think. And
Yeah.
if it doesn't work, I can pick myself back up.
Well, on behalf of all the people in Scholars of Finance, I'm really grateful that you're here and that you did make that jump. We've got about 30 to 45 seconds left here, Ross. So with that time, I want to give it to you. Is there anything else you want to share today about where you're going next or where Scholars of Finance is going next?
Sure. Where I'm going next, I hope where the world needs me and where Scholars of Finance needs me and where our members and our students need me. Where Scholars of Finance is going next. Right now, very tactically, we're launching at Brown, we're launching at Harvard, MIT, Yale, a few other schools. We'd love to be at hundreds of universities in the next couple of years. We're really focused on deepening the impact that we make on our students and then scaling that impact well. And there's a lot of things that come with that I'll spare you from. For now, we don't have time for.
All right. Well, we're right at the top of the show. So thanks, Ross, for coming on. I really appreciate it. And I hope you have a great rest of your weekend and a great week. All right. Podcast episode is over. Please leave a review and subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify if you can. Thanks again. And I hope you all have a great week.